Welcome everybody to our fifth T4T Zoom meeting, and this is our second year of Dressage4Kids Training4Teaching program. Please, everybody, make sure they've muted themselves. Again, I just want to point out and thank our sponsors, Toonie Page of Still Point Farm, who stepped forward right at the beginning of this program last year, and Lauren Spryzer's Sport Horse Elite Club has sponsored the Zoom meetings this year, and we will put up the link to her Spryzer Sport Horse Elite program. As you know, I hope all of you know, those of you who made a donation, which was not required, we have raised $6,045.84 with over 170 registrations, and this is being matched by D4K. Plus, we have the $2,500 from Teresa Davidson. So I believe that comes to a total of $14,591.68, which we will be giving out in scholarships, which will be announced next week. The deadline for the scholarship application is tomorrow night, I believe midnight, if I'm correct. Mary will correct me. So get your applications in. I'm actually surprised we don't have more, but we do have a couple of really interesting ones. Basically, it's just the requirement is that it's for your education, not for your competition, but for your education. We have recorded, some better than others, all of the previous meetings, and you have been sent the links on the emails that have been sent to you. If you need them, if you haven't got them, just send me an email and I will take care of it. Hopefully you all are used to Zoom now, so you know you can write in the chat. If you go down to the bottom of your screen where it says chat, you click on that, and then over on the right is a little column where you can write questions. And basically we will have the questions at the end of Beth's talk, unless she sees something and wants to interrupt herself. Our next meeting is next week, March 21st, and we will have the wonderful Laura King talking about your emotional intelligence brings out the best in your students. So that is a week away, not the usual 2 weeks that we have most of the time done. So we're thrilled to have tonight Beth Baumert. I never do long introductions, but and with Beth it would be very long. But one thing wonderful about Beth, I think she's always, or at least for many years since I've known her, been very interested in educating riders. She's done instructional videos and DVDs. She's a USDF certified instructor, LGRAD with distinction for judging. She was for many years the editor of Dressage Today magazine, and now heads up the Dressage Foundation. And if any of you do not know about the Dressage Foundation, please go to dressagefoundation.org. If you ever need help with just about anything that has to do, financial help with about anything that has to do with riding, it's probably there. And Beth is now the author of two wonderful books, I've been coaching too much today. When Two Spines Align, Dressage Dynamics, and her latest one that's just out, When Two Minds Meet, the Mental Dynamics of Dressage. So I give you, without further ado, Beth Baumert.
Well, hello. And we're here to talk about how to boost learning power for your students, or for you, or actually for your horse. But I want to start out by touching on a subject that I think of as of underlying importance that has to do with any successful business. And this was brought to my attention by my brother, whose job is to assess and advise businesses. He's been doing this for 20, 30 years. And it doesn't matter whether it's Home Depot or a much smaller business. After doing this for so many years, he says that it's actually become quite simplified in his mind. And and that every business, and your teaching business is a business, has to have, to be successful, what he calls 4 C's. 1, caring. 2, committed. 3, capable, or you could say competent, which is also a C, and communicative. So if one of those qualities is missing, Jack needs to fill that gap either by education or by hiring people to fill the gap. So I've come to think that these 4 C's have a lot to do with teaching. It has to do with the Dressage Foundation. It has to do with Dressage4Kids. It has to do with every business. And when you look at these 4 qualities, this is where I miss the interactive aspect of this. But I think that 2 of those qualities are quite innate, aren't they? You care and you're committed innately, but there are matters of degree, aren't there? I think there are very few seriously great teachers in the world, but they really care and they're really committed. And I think you're going to add another word in there too, because I think they're generous. That's not a C word, but I'm throwing that in. I think they love sharing. So the other 2 qualities require enormous effort and study. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
So, to be capable in this sport it requires enormous study, and it's ongoing, isn't it? Our whole lives we do this. The technique, the physics of how to ride horses, the aids, the theoretical understanding of how horses develop, what are their physical needs, their emotional needs, the endless horsemanship aspects. There's just a world of information there that needs to be learned, not just mentally, but most of you are also able to get on and do it. So mentally and physically, you need to be able to, this is a lot to learn, and it never ends. And that's actually the beauty of it. And the 4th one, communicative, how you convey your information to your students, how you listen. When you think of it, communicating is certainly a 2-way street. Whether you're communicating with your horse or you're communicating with your student. If you think of it, the listening is, feeling is part of listening, right? We don't just listen with our ears. People who ride horses feel. And the act of feeling is a receptive experience. It's the opposite of, well, the opposite would be maybe compulsive thinking, in which your mind is in a state of constant output. So it's interesting to think that maybe people who have what they call natural feel, maybe they just listen more. I don't know. Less experienced riders certainly have to think a lot because the intellectual part of their riding isn't yet automatic. And that perhaps limits their ability to feel, but I really digress. It's interesting. But also the rider can't listen to both her horse and to you at the same time. So for that reason, experienced teachers don't really mind repeating themselves. In fact, I often say to a student, I don't mind repeating myself because I know how hard this is. But there's a flip side to that coin, isn't there? A really good student makes a conscientious effort to prevent her teacher from saying the same thing twice, let alone again and again. So I just wanted to start out mentioning the 4 C's. But we're here to talk about some of the content of How Two Minds Meet. And I was reminded today by the publisher that all D4K folks get a 25% discount. Do they know what that discount code or coupon is, Landon? Oh, you're muted.
Mary will put that discount code in the chat.
Okay, and that's certainly not just for my books, that's for all of their books. So we're here really to talk about how learning principles boost learning. I mean, if we only learn technique, we would be missing the heartfelt part of why we all need to have horses in our lives. Technique is incredibly important because it makes the horse comfortable, because it makes him balanced, and it maximizes his ability to perform, but it is basically mechanical, isn't it? Love of the horse comes first, and love invites feel and intuition, and it's all about riding horses is all about spirit, isn't it? I remember, isn't it funny how you remember things? This was at least 4 decades ago. I remember Kathy Conley saying to me, someday riders will become so skilled, so proficient physically, that winning will be a matter of the mind. And that really stuck with me. And at the top levels, I think we're maybe getting to that point. Principles of learning apply to all different kinds of learning, whether you're in first grade or first level and Grand Prix or grad school. Educational psychologists study principles of learning to figure out how people can learn faster and retain information more easily. So when these principles are applied, learning is usually faster and more easily retained. So you'd think this belongs just to instructors, but it doesn't just belong to instructors, because the ultimate responsibility for learning is with the student. So it's for the instructor, but it's also for the student, and it's for the horse too, because he's learning from you every day. So I'm going to talk about 9 principles, but you might be able to think of others. The information about this is kind of endless. When I wrote the first book about technique, I knew I would be done because physics is finite. There was an end to it, but this goes on and on. So, and I'm not the only expert here. I can see your names. There are a lot of experts here. And even the less experienced ones have your own unique and very interesting things that you could add to this conversation if it were a conversation. That would be fun. So my point is that you could Google principles of learning and come up with a lot more than 9 of them, and you can probably think of some yourselves. But the first one, and for me the most important one, is the principle of imitation or social learning. Social learning theorists posit that we learn primarily from observing others. And you're really, really super fortunate if there's someone in your barn or someone nearby who you really admire and can call a mentor or a role model. When Landon and I were learning to ride, there were really not very many people to imitate in this country. They were few and far between. And there certainly wasn't any internet. You know, there was not much. But bit by bit, the wheels turned, and the Lendons and Carol and the people who began this sport in this country, really, they got better and better. And now we're in a very good situation, I think. The principle of imitation can work against you. Because bad riding is just as contagious as great riding. So it wouldn't be a bad policy to just never watch bad riding. And with Clip My Horse and many endless opportunities on the internet, every single person can watch great riding. Shelley Francis belongs in the same category as when it was very, very hard to find people to emulate. And she had her little brother sit in the judge's box with Henry Weinmullen's book. I've forgotten the name of it, I'm sorry. It was a great book. I had it too. And there was a favorite picture of her, and she would tell her brother, "Tell me when I look like this picture." And that's a tough way to learn. That's Northern New England determination. There's another way to look at social learning, and that's the culture in your barn. Hopefully it's a culture where everybody is wishing the best for everyone else. That's so important, that be aware of this and try to cultivate this in your barn, that everyone is cheering for everyone. And that definitely maximizes the ability to learn. I don't know. I hope you haven't had the feeling of somebody in the corner saying something, that you think isn't wishing you well. And that's a bad feeling. And hopefully it doesn't exist too often. Social learning for horses. They don't admire the elevation of another's half pass, right? But they do get a little hyped up maybe sometimes when another horse comes in the ring. And that's an opportunity for you sometimes to ask for that little bit more expression in the half pass or whatever you're doing. Another aspect of social learning for horses, the value of hacking. Hacking in tandem or but at least with other horses. Sometimes it can be arranged, but we just don't think of it, Bye, Fern. You told me she'd leave. So sometimes we have that opportunity, but we don't take advantage of it. So, when you think of it, see if you can arrange it. When I was at Skidmore, we had a drill team every Monday night. Drill team. Horses loved that. It was fabulous fabulous training for the horses, and fabulous training for riders too. So I'm sure you have things to add about social learning and imitation. It's a great topic, but I'm going to go along to the next one, the principle of readiness or sequence. If you were great at first grade, second grade's won't be too hard. It's the same thing with dressage levels, of course. Those who do well at training level will probably do fine at first. And the knowledge, the theory of dressage is organized like this for us sequentially. But there are endless examples of it. Great teachers are like scientists. They deeply understand sequence. And the most underlying qualities or possible issues are horsemanship factors, aren't they? If you want to get to the bottom of any problem, you first look at the tack, the footing, the horses, what the horse did yesterday, how he feels, is he having any possible physical issues, or does the rider have worries? It's endless. Speaking of going to the bottom line, to the very underlying first most important things, I was reminded of the purpose of the introductory level when I needed to do an article or a series of articles for USDF Connections. And I guess I never paid enough attention to this. But the purpose of introductory level is to introduce the rider and or horse to the sport of dressage, to show understanding of riding the horse forward with a steady tempo into an elastic contact with independent, steady hands and a correct balanced seat, to show proper geometry of figures in the arena with correct bend, parentheses, corners, and circles. Holy smokes, that about covers it, doesn't it? And those things are things that you work on all the way to Grand Prix. But these things we work on forever. But it was amazing to me, and I think it's quite appropriate, that purpose. But wow, it's very demanding. Sequence. Here's a question. Can you put your heels down if the muscles on the top of your foot are tense? You're right, everybody's a name. Or if your knee pinches. There are a number of things that can prevent the heels from going down. That's one out of 1,000 examples, isn't it? Can your horse go freely forward if the cantle of your saddle is too low? Probably not. You're probably behind the motion and having a hard time getting your own balance. These are sequential issues that great teachers have a knack, and they've learned it, for finding the most underlying problem. If the rider is behind the vertical and driving the forehand down with his seat, well, the horse is going to be on the forehand, and that there are endless examples. Theory. Understanding theory is all about sequence. The content is sequential. A task is always easier when you understand why. And that's what theory does for us. Why is all about intention. You can have action without intention. I'll give you an example personally that I'm not proud of, but for probably 15 years, I did yoga without the intention of getting stronger and more supple. You might think that's crazy, but I actually think that I was doing it thinking, well, you know, as you get older, you don't want to get worse. So I think I was doing that with the intention of not getting worse. And guess what? I think I didn't get worse, but I didn't get better. And there are reasons why you do everything on a horse, right? This example speaks to the importance of your intention. And this is as a rider, but it's always also mostly as a teacher, because you can, I remember sort of a light bulb lesson with Lilo 4. I was riding Singapore. I love that horse. And she was explaining, she was showing, not explaining, she was showing how shoulder in improved the gait. So the exercise was, I was to use the RSVP letters. Okay. Tracking right, shoulder in from R to P, straighten. And then she would say, is the trot better? Is it better? And then again on the other long side, is the trot better? So those who, do you do shoulder in because it's in second level, test 1, or do you do it to improve the trot? And when you do second level test 1, do you have it in your mind that you're improving the trot? As a teacher, you can help your student think that way. When you do shoulder 4, are you doing it to improve your horse's lateral balance? And when you do half halts and transitions, especially, are you intending to improve your horse's longitudinal balance? Then there's that additional layer. Does that intention take the form of hope or belief or expectation? Hope is sort of wishful thinking, yeah? If you believe that your down transition will improve the horse's balance, that's based on some experience. And your chances are better, right? And if you expect the transition to improve his balance, it'll probably happen. Because, and that's probably based on a lot of experience. If you expect it to happen. Then we can step back, talking again about sequence, and think about what makes the shoulder in great. In my experience, an incredible 10-meter circle makes an amazing shoulder in. We all do 10-meter circles, but very, very few of them are really good. I might as well explain an exercise that I love that's very simple. You do have to ask the student if it's okay, because you're going to put your student on a lunge line. So that needs to be okay. And have her walk a 10-meter circle around you. You're just kind of a post, a supple post, but you're a post. You don't really do anything. And you have a 5-meter lunge line, and the student does a 10-meter walk circle around you. And you have to be really careful with this exercise, since it's a exercise to improve 10-meter circles. You don't want to do too many 10-meter circles. So usually you can do 1 or 2 and then walk straight down the long side, and then the next, 2 letters down, maybe do another 10-meter circle. And it takes a while before most people can do a 10-meter circle and have the horse on the aids, not falling in or out. Then you can do a 10-meter circle in trot when the walk is good, and then be done with it. Don't do it too much, but then let the rider off, and off they go. And now do a 10-meter circle in the corner, and then shoulder in. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. And I've never not had it work. But the point is really that shoulder in is an add-on difficulty. If you cannot do a really good 10-meter circle, or if your student can't do a 10-meter circle, she's not going to really be able to do a shoulder in. So sequence, add-on difficulties. Well, it's the basics, isn't it? And the basics are all about sequence. So moving on, how are we doing on time? The principle of repetition or practice. So we're told that extreme competence happens after 10,000 repetitions. And then, of course, we're told not to be repetitive. But Malcolm Gladwell wrote that book called The Outliers. Some of you have probably read it. And he talks about geniuses like the Beatles and Bill Gates, to mention 2 very different industries. That they practiced because they loved what they were doing. And we have to be careful. We're told that repetition is like drill. And actually, sometimes it is, if your horse doesn't love it, or if he doesn't understand, or if he's tired. But meaningful repetition, that you know why you're repeating, and your horse knows why you're repeating. That's enjoyable. Be sure you're not the perfectionist that avoids the stretch zone. If you're only in the comfort zone, you never get all those repetitions. And the first reps really won't be good, will they? Yeah, the 10,000th shoulder in will be fabulous, but the first will be ugly. And one of the things I love about Lendon's teaching is she makes it clear that it's okay if it's ugly. The first time, or if you're just working on something, it's not going to be beautiful. So there are side benefits of repetition: kinesthetic learning, muscle memory. When the rider is simply aware of muscle memory, if you can make your student simply aware of it, it helps. It helps that the information goes from the conscious brain to the unconscious brain. So then your student is mentally free. The value of mental practice is really, really interesting. When I was at Skidmore, I had a fabulous trainer. He was phenomenal. And we had good horses too off the track at Saratoga. But in the summer, I couldn't ride often. And that really, it drove me nuts. But I rode in my head. And one year I came back after summer vacation, and my instructors, I was riding jumpers at the time. There was no such thing as dressage, I don't think, in those days. But anyway, not in our country. Hardly. He said, "Where in the world did you ride all summer?" And I had to say, I haven't ridden since I was last here. And he was amazed. But that's why. Repetition with regard to teachers repeating. Some things are easy to fix. Put your hands down. That's easy to fix. But other things, positional leg problems, often require a cousin of repetition, which is persistence and consistency. Put your hands down isn't always easy, is it? Sometimes when a rider's behind the motion, you say, touch the withers, they absolutely can't do it. So that's a diagnostic thing too. As I said, it's good when the student tries to avoid the teacher repeating, but there is a limit. I can remember one of my favorite things is Landon saying, now, how about instead of me saying, look up, you tell yourself that. That should work, should help. The principle of reward. Conrad Schumacher always used to say the best reward was good riding. The best reward for the horse was good riding. He oddly enough didn't like it when you patted the horse, but he insisted that this good riding was the reward for the horse. But we're like the Beatles and Bill Gates, aren't we? Passion for the sport, and riding is sometimes like it's its own reward. Here's another, you be aware of the perfectionist who also might unconsciously withhold reward when the horse is trying, but there's something. Like I can remember a situation where a horse had a tongue problem, and it was very, very frustrating for the rider, but the horse was trying. So it takes a really big person and a really good rider, and a good trainer to praise the horse when you're not pleased. Principle number 5, primacy. That which you learn first, you learn best. And this is, of course, of great importance when you learn right the first time. And I mean, not just physically. Of course, we normally think of physically learning to ride, but also attitudinally and philosophically. In my life, I've had to, in the early years of dressage, it wasn't as horse friendly as it is now. And I withdrew for a while for that reason. But it still is possible to learn wrong the first time, and it's very hard to undo. The primacy also has to do with things during your ride. I always ask a rider in the very, very beginning, what's your horse's best quality, or the easiest gait, or the best movement? Then if you know what's really good, it's easy to retain that quality and to build on it. The principle of primacy also involves your warm-up. What you do in the beginning of the ride lays the foundation, doesn't it, for the rest of your ride? It needs to start with the basics and build sequentially, even with horses that are really well established. The principle of recency. Now, this is the opposite of primacy, referring not to what you did first, but what you did most recently. And this principle is easy to apply in your teaching every day. Teachers who recap and review that which they did during the lesson are more successful at fixing the information in their rider's mind. Teachers who end the lesson on a positive note make a difference. Teachers who give their students homework are more likely to have progress for the next lesson. This also has to do with if you get to apply a skill soon after learning it, or if you're learning shoulder in or you're teaching shoulder in and you get to say, look at that one over there. It helps. In your lessons, you don't introduce a difficult concept and then not give the rider a chance to execute it. But the extreme example is like learning German in high school and then needing to apply it 10 or 20 years later. That's not going to be of very much use. Now, primacy and recency, this is all about schoolmasters ride that edge, don't they, of what they learned first, the best ones having learned correctly first, and riding the edge of what they're experiencing most recently, which might be less than ideal. But that's why schoolmasters, the good ones, need to be refreshed occasionally, but then they revert back to their original training. So principle number 7 is accountability. Students who will be tested learn better than those who won't be tested. And also those who have quizzes in between the tests do even better. In our world, that kind of translates into those who show will do better than those who don't show. And those who do qualifying shows for regional championships or maybe even national championships will do even better, because those are like the little quizzes, aren't they? Leading up to the big exam. Showing, by definition, takes horses and riders out of the comfort zone and into the stretch zone where learning takes place. But accountability is all about goals. And last year, London shared her goal sheets with everyone. I'm sure some of you have those. Intermediate, short-term, long-term goals. Sometimes in the intermediate department, sometimes people just kind of wander around hoping to get better. On the other hand, we have the adult amateur who worked very hard all day at something quite challenging and maybe needs to just wander around, which is fine, but they're not in a learning situation. Horses have goals too. it's tough for dressage horses. Now, barrel racers, hunters, jumpers, it's very clear that there's a party around every bend. But in the beginning, it has to be hard for dressage horses to understand what in the world the point is of going MXK sideways when you can do it straight. It must be difficult. And I think most good trainers are understanding of that and help them to understand the point. And later, of course, dressage horses are more goal oriented because they end up getting that gym mentality, just like we have. People have a gym mentality. So the principle of organization, we touched about this a little bit before when we talked about sequence and things have an order about them. Organization it's about context. When I worked for Dressage Today, I could have done 4 articles right in a row on shoulder in with 4 different people. And those articles would have been completely different. It's fascinating. And that's how you get context in your thinking. Many of you, I can't see you, but I can see your names and I know who you are. You have read hundreds of articles like that, and that gives you context. It's very interesting. You might have learned about rhythm in kindergarten when you played on a little drum, but then your understanding of rhythm grows exponentially. You see it as part of the training scale. Then you see it as the purpose of the training level. And then your understanding of rhythm is enormously different by the time you get to Grand Prix. It's very, very, very sophisticated. Your understanding increases within different contexts. And that's organization of content. Part of the principle of organization is organization of your time. Speaking of time, that's the lesson plan. For example, first I warm up by doing this, and then I do that, and then I assess, and then I decide what the content of my work's going to be today, and then I assess, and then I cool down. The organization of your content can really relax your student or his horse if it's task oriented. By that I mean, and many teachers teach this way anyway, but it helps the rider who's nervous, for example. If you say, okay, first we're going to go down the center line and leg yield to the corner letter, and then you're going to circle 15 meters at C or A, and then you're going to go on the diagonal, and when you get to, so the rider is thinking, now I'm doing this, now I'm doing that, now I'm doing the other thing, and he's concentrating on the task. It's task-oriented teaching. He's not concentrating on whether or not he's going to be able to control his horse. As it works out, the task may or may not be done well, but it will get better because of the concentration, the focus on the task instead of on, oh my God, what's going to happen next? As can happen sometimes when a student needs to be relaxed and is having trouble in that department. So the last principle I want to talk about today is intensity. Intensity is probably not the best word. I just can't think of a better one. But there are very few, as I said, great teachers. But as I said, they care and they are committed and they are capable and they communicate well. And there's an intensity about their communication because they care and because they're committed. They empower their riders. They tell them and show them what to do. Ciara Kirkland, I don't think she does symposiums anymore, but when she did, she almost always rode every horse at one point in time. She told them and she showed them what to do. Great teachers do that. They show them, they tell them how to do it. They show them how to do it and why. What, how, and why. And they share their stories and they make you laugh. And when you laugh, you become more open, don't you? As a student, your student becomes more open when they laugh. Again, feeling is a receptive experience. Great teachers make their students feel like they can do it. And I'm going to end by quoting Allie. Allie said, "Writers don't necessarily remember what they did, but they remember how you made them feel." And I love that. And that spoke to me about what we all try to do so very well as we can. So I haven't been looking at questions at all. Have you, Lyndon?
I don't know that we have any. Amazing. Anyone have any questions? You could even unmute and ask at this point. That was a lot of information that you gave out. Allie just commented that I think this talk could go on for another 4 hours. Thank you, Beth. Loved your books and tonight's lecture.
Good.
More compliments and questions, Beth. Anyone have any questions?
It could go on for 4 hours if we could all communicate.
Yeah, interact. It's frustrating not to be able to interact.
It's nice to see everyone.
Well, I think that's fantastic, Beth. And those of you, if you weren't here right in the very beginning, at the top of the chat, we have the information on the scholarship application, which are due by tomorrow night, and also the information on Beth's 2 books. You've had a taste of it, of her books here. And the third thing is the information on the discount that Trafalgar Square offers to anyone connected to Dressage4Kids. So that information is also in the chat. And we've been asked to do a shout out for the Region 8 clinic. I will send that out in our newsletter.
Right.
So I don't see, am I missing anything? Thank you, wonderful lecture. Thank you, Beth, thank you, great information. Lots of thank yous, Beth, but I don't see any questions.
All right. Fun to
Wow,
see.
lots of thank yous. So again, thank you so much, Beth, for giving your time to us. And everyone have a wonderful March. And remember, our final lecture in this series is next Sunday. Okay?
Great.
Night, everybody.
Night, everyone.
Thank you again, Beth.
You bet.
Thanks.